Okay, so I just give me 2 minutes. I just need to get the link. So, that's all right.
Okay, we're ready. Managed to get the picture up there twice.
Me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Sorry, this is just. There it Okay, you're gonna have to, hold on. I'm gonna back up to the back.
I can tell you a little bit about that homebrew I made last
Go ahead. I know. Is there enough to cover all these 6-packs I've been handing out?
I gotta get busier, Bob.
Yeah. You professors are always just holding out on us, you know?
There you go, you got it. You got the advance. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, saved by the bell.
All right. Thank you. So yeah, what I'm going to be talking about, just so you know, Pete is my advisor. I finished my master's degree at UW in May under Pete's being my advisor, and I just started my PhD program there. So I'll say thank you to VP and WRC for providing funding for my research. And my master's work is all with VP data. There's one under the Moxa and John Fields in Wyoming. Since then, we now have 16 or 17 operating companies from oil and gas industry, and we're working throughout the entire state. This last March was published in the Journal for American Society of Mining and Reclamation. I hadn't looked at it since March until last week when I was preparing this talk, and I was happy to see the goals when I initially built this database are still pretty much the same exact goals that we have 3 years later after the starting of it. Short term, the goals of this project were to quantify disturbance and reclamation efforts and to evaluate the reclamation status of individual wellheads. That's some of the stuff that I've been inputting into this game and fish database. Long-term goals of this project and what I'm really interested in are to analyze trends that lead to success and failure. So basically to identify best management practices associated with to have this as a strong decision management tool for the industry, to evaluate regulatory standards for reclamation. I'll talk about that. I'll talk about all these points at some point. And offer a flexible and shareable database that allows for additional data input from diverse sources. And I have to point out quickly, the data performance or database performance is very dependent on the data that we put into the database. Oh, I'm sorry about that. This is the framework. I worked all with Microsoft Access with my master's degree. I'm just going to go through some of the logic of my framework. Access has 2 megabyte storage capacity, so I have to switch to SQL Server. I'm sort of learning about that as I go along, and I'll be working pretty closely with Nick to figure out the best way to change this framework so that it fits in with this mapping flow that they talked about before. what I did with my master's work was only with well pads, and as I said, in those 3 fields. So this is just a relationship table that I made. My unique identifier is this API number. API stands for American Petroleum Institute. It's unique to every wellhead in the state. The reason I use that is a lot of things change. The API number doesn't. For example, BP has sold their asset in the Jonah field, the energy. Even though the operator changed, the API number of these well pads stays the same, so we can track them over time. These tables in green are what I would call reclamation practice tables. So seed mixes, and in here, I'll explain the master a little bit more. In here, I have latitude, longitude coordinates for the central well or the initial well on a well pad, the amount of acreage that are disturbed, the amount of acreage that's under reclamation, whether it's a federal or a private well, and some other geographic information. All these other tables will tell me, so the seed mix table has the API number. I know what well pad I'm talking to, if it was seeded, when it was seeded, what it was seeded with, over time. Same thing for sites that were fertilized, sites that have soil amendment put down on them, sites that were herbicide sprayed. And this framework was built specifically with the data I had. Some of the data I have now, there's some mechanical weed control and stuff like that, so I'm going to have to add additional tables to this framework for that. This table here is just a disturbance table. Some of these pads get disturbed after the initial well, so it's nice if I see a pad go from it looks like it's really good to it's awful. Oftentimes we can go back and say, oh, there's a redisturbance on that site. That's why all that vegetation went away. These tables in yellow are what I would call the reclamation results tables. The vegetation monitoring table here tells me the API numbers, so what well pad we're talking about, the data year, when data was collected for well pads and for their undisturbed reference sites. And I'll get into some of the problems I have with that a little bit later on. In some cases, we have soil sampling that's done on these well pads, so we link them when we have it. These 2 tables here, DEQ criteria and BLM criteria, tell me if sites are passing certain BLM criteria or if they're passing the DEQ stormwater pollution prevention plan. And the tables in the blue on the bottom are just sort of geographic tables that I can query in. This slope aspect table I link to each well pad, and that's using a 10 meter digital elevation map for the state of Wyoming. The soil map I'll show later, but that's just, I took some stuff from the NRCS soil map, so I can link some of that to the tables. Additionally, that's not in here, I have linked DayMet, which is a big weather database from the Oak Ridge Lake National Laboratory, to this, so I can see the temperature, the precipitation. There's like 5 or 6 different variables that the DayMet database tracks, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. What my master's database looked like when I made this all into a personal geodatabase and put it into ArcGIS. You can see these points are the points that are in that master table over the landscape, so I can see what well pad we're talking about. Currently, I have 15,536 acres, so 53% of my database that are point files. And again, I'll have to work with Nick to kind of improve that and digitize all the stuff. I have, and that's 54% of the database like that. 10,513, which is 36% of the database. I have digitized it down like that so we can see this is the well pad. That area in green is what's undergoing reclamation. That area in red is the long-term disturbance. And then I have 2,879 acres, or about 10% of the data is just well specific. We don't have the roads or the pipelines correlated with it. But again, you can see that area in red is sort of this long-term disturbance where the equipment and stuff on the pad is. The area in green is what's undergoing reclamation. So yeah, to get back, I just wanted to sort of show this framework again. But we currently have 28,928.25 acres of disturbance, of which 23,302, about 81%, are in the process of being reclaimed. I just spoke with Bill from Denbury, who's here, that we just finished some of our confidentiality agreements with them, but in the next couple of weeks, I'm looking forward to 191 acres of pipeline that we're going to be adding into this. I'm currently working with some ConocoPhillips data, so I think probably by the end of this month, we'll be looking at somewhere between 32 and 35,000 acres in this database. So it's continuously growing. What I've been having the hardest time with is evaluating the success of reclamation, and some of that's due to inconsistencies in regulatory standards. Monitoring methodologies sometimes change. Monitoring timing, I'm finding, is critical. In some cases, no monitoring has occurred, and it's, I want to say, somewhere about 300 to 600 acres of this database. We don't have monitoring. I have the seed mixes and stuff that's been on the site, but I don't have accurate monitoring. The majority of it we do have monitoring data for. That's something that I think we need to improve a little bit. I read a lot lately about project management. This book with Kersner, it's called Project Management, KPIs, Metrics, KPIs, and Dashboards. And he talks a lot about in any project, monitoring is critical as a decision support tool. So if we can improve our monitoring, we can really answer, I think, some of the questions that are being asked. And I'll get into that here in just a little bit. So monitoring, most of the stuff I'm going to be talking about, specific examples, is going to come from what my master's research was, because I've had the most time to work with that and analyze it. In the Jonah infill, you can see 2006 and 2007 sites were monitored by having 5 1 meter frames, essentially Daubenmeier squares on well pads and adjacent areas. This occurred all between June 5th and June 8th. In 2006, it happened in the middle of July 2007. 2008, this monitoring changed, where we're using now 10 Daubenmeier frames along a transect. This happened in June. 2009, the methodology was the same. It happened in July. 2010, 100 meter transect or 250 meter transects were used on well pads and adjacent reference sites. This happened early June 2011. That monitoring was the same. This happened in early to mid-July. I just wanted to note some of the language here. This is all from an annual report that was submitted to the BLM, but from 2008 on, everything is in accordance with BLM Tech Notice 1734-4, which is sampling vegetation attributes. This is the table of contents here. But you can see there's over 12 approved methods in that, which makes it somewhat problematic, because not only it's hard for me when I look at data from one year to the next in one field, but oftentimes at that same year, MOPSA might have been being monitored differently. So when I try to ask the question, what's this seed mix doing when we put it down, it's really hard to compare. Oftentimes we have different operators within the same field using 2 different methodologies, so it's hard to compare apples to oranges in that case. I wanted to just show this real quick. Another problem that I'll be working on here soon is that using 100 meter transect or 250 meter transect, sometimes I don't know if that's going to be telling the best story. I just came up with this slide because it's the only site that I could find where I got reports on the same exact well pad that happened, monitoring happened a couple days apart. You can see on June 4th, someone with the initials DLP did the monitoring on this site. And on June 12th, it looks like someone named ZT did the monitoring on that site. Same exact site, but you can see this is just the back of that sheet. The numbers don't match up very well, so it makes that, I just put my database, what's in the annual report. What could have happened is that both of these reports can be 100% perfect, but they picked 2 different 100 meter transects to collect their data on that well pad. So that's something that we need to work on and improving the way that we collect data. So when I talk about long-term goals to identify trends. Let me just get into some reasons why I think timing of monitoring is critical. These are all sites. There's 120 total sites in this graph. The reason I'm using grass and bunch grasses is these are the two areas in Jonah that aren't associated with the reference points. You need 3 grass species total, 3 native grass species, and at least 2 of them need to be bunch grasses to pass the Jonah Area Office regulatory criteria. You can see these sites that started in 2006, or that's at least when my data set started. There's this linear trend of more and more sites are improving than passing this grass criteria. 2009, 55 sites passed the bunch grass criteria and total grass criteria. 2010, so that's roughly 50%. 2010, we dropped down to 10 sites past that bunch grass criteria. And that went from 50% to less than 10%. In bunch grasses, I can figure out in my head why if bunch grass was on all these sites, where did they go in 2010? This graph is kind of upside down. I should have thought about this more when I made it. But bare ground percent, each one of these lines represents an individual well pad. You can see 2007, from 2007 to 2008, most of our sites have bare ground improving on them. 2008, 2009, it's pretty stable. Going back to that disturbance table, you see a well that went like this. I can go back and look and say, why did that well all of a sudden has 100% bare ground? And it's because that well had a disturbance put back on it. 2010, all of a sudden we go from low bare ground or really high ground cover is what we're seeing in that on this kind of valley in that graph. 2010 it spikes back up, and I couldn't figure out why, because 2011 it started to come back down. So I put this daily temperature data to my graph, or to the Jonah field. You can see in 2009 there was 52 days where that red line is daily minimum temperature. I use 0 degrees because in common degree day models for plants, 0 degrees Celsius is the minimum developmental threshold. That below freezing, plants are not putting any energy into growth. 2010, we have 4 days where the daily minimum temperature is above. So when I go back and look at 2009 looked pretty good, 2010 looked pretty bad. I think what is happening is that it was probably too cold. I took a degree day model for winter wheat, and the reason I use that is because it's a full season crop, and it's been a lot of studies on it. And in fact, there wasn't enough degree days for us to be able to identify winter wheat when we look at this graph. So it's tough. Coupled on that, the monitoring techniques change from year to year. Yeah, it makes that analysis pretty difficult. This is, whoa. Daily temperature, or I'm sorry, daily precipitation that I linked to this database. You can see 2009 when sites were monitored, and I'm using the mean collection date. So 2009, all those sites were monitored kind of in mid-July. That's just the middle date. There's 7 inches of precip. 2010, I got 7 inches of precip when we go to early June. 2011, we have almost 12 inches of precip. So yeah, that I think probably is affecting the vegetation that's on the ground. I have to ask if those sites in 2010 were monitored 2 or 3 weeks later, would those numbers be totally different than what's in that database? Getting into some of the problems with regulatory criteria, this is just a map I made, or not a map, but a figure I made with the criteria for different field offices and the TBQs. You can see up in Jonah, in Pineville, I have the 2 most strict criteria in the state. There's 11 of them. With things like forb richness, forb density, shrub richness, shrub density, plant vigor, which is I think a hard thing to really measure sometimes. Percent cover, lack of weeds, the grass richness, like I said, but you can see pretty much everything in here is compared to an adjacent reference site. So forb richness is one of the things that I want to talk about because I have a figure coming up, but you need the same number of forbs on your reclaimed as you do on your off-site reference, and this is pretty problematic. When we go over to Kemmerer, where that oversees the Moxa, there's none of these forb richness or shrub density criteria. So if I take Jonah, we have like, I want to say 67% greater success if we took my sites in Jonah and ran them versus the Kemmerer criteria, because they're so different. And that's something that I've been finding problematic, because it's like, what is reclamation success or restoration success? And in a lot of ways, this is one framework for measuring success. Is am I passing these criteria? Yes or no? It's problematic. So this is that soil map I told you about before. Each one of these different colors, polygons, is just representing a different map unit. Okay, one map unit, map unit 5203. There was 52 or 53 pads. There's 52 or 3 reference sites selected out there. That criteria, like I said, you need the same number of forbs on site as off site. This is number of forbs present on my reclaimed sites. This is the number of forbs present on the reference sites. There's a range of 1 to 7. You can see this site passes with 2 forbs on it because its reference transect only has 1 forb on it. You come down here, this site's got 5 forbs on it, and it fails because there's 7 forbs on its reference transect. So when you look at that binary criteria of a one-time transect, you could say that this site with 2 forbs on it is a more successfully reclaimed site than this site down here with 5 forbs on it, which I think is kind of problematic. Furthermore, you could say there's 3 sites with 7 forbs on them. That means all 50 of our other reference transects would fail. That criteria, they're replaced against the reference sites with the most forbs. So I think we need to start looking at things like ranges of values or means. I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that one site needs 7 forbs and one site needs 1 forb on it, just based on the way we're selecting the references. This is some of the field work I did, and I'll show you a little bit more. But I have a camera with a geotag on it, so I just ran around these well pads. It's, I think, was 64 meters from this point of this pad to this point of this pad. So these are pretty close to each other. I was just running reference transects sort of all around to figure out what's the variability and what might be problematic while I'm using one reference transect. I just have a trial version of this software called GPS Photo Link, so it strips out the geographic information from my camera and puts it on the map for me. This is in Google Earth, but I can put it into ArcGIS or Excel spreadsheet or several other things. But you can see this is where I took the picture, and this is my field of view. So what I was doing was taking a picture and then running the transect right down the center of it. I think I'm going to talk about this picture here in a second. It's important. I was monitoring all these transects using a sample placed. It's almost like a digital Dobbenmeyer frame. This picture, you can see what I'm looking at in it from Google Earth. And this ridge in my field notes, I say I was running my transect at the base of this hill right there. So in that case, that picture is almost spot on perfect. That you can see this is what I was looking at when I ran that transect. Sometimes the field of view gets skewed a little bit, but where I actually am at is almost always very, very good. Let me go back just real quick. So the 2 pictures I'm going to talk about here, this is where I took photo 316. 268 is the next photo that I'm going to show. 316, my transect, ran right kind of through the center of that picture. 268, which is not very far away. This is what my reference transect would be like if I chose to start it at that point. Again, the 316, this is, when I'm taking a digital picture, this is what that transect sort of looks like. So my goal for my reclaim site, it's going to be really, really hard to reclaim that site. That's success standard. 268, which is, I think those are like 51 meters apart or something. And then you can kind of see that real green area starting at the bottom of the picture. This is what those aerial pictures take. So it's like you have two completely different holes just if I decide to run a transect. So if you know, not very far from where I ran the other transect. So I think we need to start incorporating ranges of this environmental patchiness into where success criteria are. Again, I've been working pretty closely with Blair Robertson, who's a new statistics professor at our department. He's a sampling expert. When you can see in this picture, this is a pretty patchy environment around these well pads, and oftentimes even the well pads themselves are pretty patchy. Like from here to here was 170. This was 173 meters from here to here, and this is 126 meters. So the well pad is about 2,000 square meters. But if you ran one reference transect right here, you're going to get a completely different picture of that pad than if you ran right here. So we need to, I think, have a little bit more of a spatially balanced approach to our sampling. This is a program, this balanced acceptance sampling. It's pretty new. Blair developed this. I'm working with him pretty closely with, just suggest methods for improving our monitoring. Long-term goals, risk management. There's, I guess, several areas where this might be applicable. The reason I brought this framework back up is I added this lookup table right here for my seed mix. That was one of the newest tables of this database. This table for seeding, I usually have something in there. It might say seed mix A, or it might say a late cereal seed mix, or alkaline seed mix, or something like that. Initially, when I was trying to identify these best management practices, that's what I would just query as group sites by what seed mixes they're using on the pads. This lookup table actually tells me everything that's in that seed mix, and oftentimes we can go to the site where the seeds came from. This is the typical seed bag label. In this particular instance, you can see the origin. This Indian rice grass came from Canada from seed lot number 005-2275. Some of these seeds in the mix came from Colorado. Some came from Utah, and so on and so forth. But you can see over here, there is a little bit of weeds in those seed mixes. When we talk about something like risk management, oftentimes these seeds in these seed lots are grown in monocultures that are sprayed over time with different herbicides. So we could potentially track down to the site level if we have a cheatgrass problem or something like that. If it's coming from a seed lot, we can use that to make decisions to probably let's not use seed from the seed lot anymore on our sites and things like that. And then this is just another seed pattern. Talk about that. Long-term goals, data from other sources. So yeah, this is currently we have data from 16 operating companies. Ultra just bought Shell's asset up in the Pinedale, so I have everything that Shell used to operate. It's all now Ultra, so I couldn't decide if I should say 16 or 17 companies. A couple weeks ago, I met with some people from the coal industry about potentially using some of their data to put into this reclamation database. Other UW research projects, I'm just going to show a slide here in a minute of a site where I was just collecting insects on it. One of my fellow PhD students, Megan Wilson, that's going to be the basis of her research, is looking at insects on different reclaimed pads. But because I have that API number, as long as she's tracking her well pads by API number, her data can be directly linked to this database. And there's several other kind of isolated studies where they're looking at 7 or 8 different well paths and doing different soil amendments and things like that. But as long as we have the API number of the well path, we can link our data to that and look at some of these finer scale research projects that are going on. This pad right here, you can see where I was. This is what I was saying, the field of view gets screwed up sometimes. I'm standing right here on the edge of that well pad when I took the picture, but really I was looking down the middle. You can see this is the edge of the well pad there. This is a particular pad that was seeded with Rocky Mountain plant. I just collected insects with sweep netting on the well pad itself and then off the well pad. But you can see on that pad that's dominated with Rocky Mountain deep plant, we have this. I was going down the order, but we've got 5 different orders compared to 3 orders. We've got 43. Our abundance is 43 there. I think it's 17 down here. So, and I've done this on a bunch of other pads with different vegetation. Results vary, but I think it'd be neat to link that stuff to the database and figure out some of these associations. If we have good vegetation data with this insect data, we can start thinking what's the vegetation doing to our insect communities and things like that. And then these are just some pictures I thought were cool. Butterfly and some bees using these bee plants. One particular pad, this is a horned lark nest, but you can see where I was on that well pad when I took that picture. And when I look at a lot of horned lark nests on like a Google image search, their nests look pretty similar. So I think it'd be also interesting to look at our vegetation monitoring data and try to figure out what wildlife species are using different well paths. Are there commonalities on paths that have horned lark nests on them or things like that? So I think that there are and there's probably other things I haven't really thought of that can link to this and other questions we can be asking. Other potential uses. I've been sort of working on a form system right now. I'm just taking data in from these companies in whatever format they give it to me, and I'm trying to make sense of it. Eventually, what I would think would make this much better is if we had a form system so people, that's the hardest part of what I do is entering data from spreadsheets or from Word files or from handwritten sheets into the database. If there's a form system that can have rapid input and make just analysis go a lot faster. Generate reports to guide decision making. So if we had this rapid data input, you can quickly spit out reports. These are our well paths that have weeds on them. These are our well paths that have good sagebrush on them. Things like that, and guide our future decision. What seed mixes should be used the next year? What sites need to be sprayed or handled? Work with similar databases or tools. So I talked earlier about the mitigation opportunity mapping tool. We'll be working pretty closely with you guys here pretty soon. Guide for other states, industries, and future development. This is currently by far the largest known database of this type in the world. And that's a problem. What I like about that is one of the big problems in restoration ecology is there's a lot more stuff being done on the ground by practitioners than there is being done in labs or by scientists. So using some of the work that's already been done, hopefully we can learn a whole lot about restoration ecology or land reclamation from that, and then generate site or area specific restoration plans. The reason I think I have one more slide after this, and then I can take some questions. But this is up in the Lost Cabin Manita Divide Lysistrate area. This is ConocoPhillips is one of the big operators out here, so I'm currently trying to figure out the acreage of seed mixes that have been put on the site, but I don't have any spatial or acreage data for it. But somewhere up in this green, I'm not exactly but then down over here, it's like a whole different environment. It's not that far apart. This is just one of the wells I took. I took this from behind the well. This was last summer when I was out doing some work up in that area. And in some cases, when I looked at a well like this, I'm not sure that this, anywhere around this is good sage grouse habitat. That I don't know that we can even think it's possible to get sagebrush to germinate here. Where I think in that case where I was talking about site-specific plans, maybe controlling erosion and preventing noxious weeds might be more important than that, than providing sage grouse habitat if it's not in that sage grouse, if it wasn't sage grouse habitat. So I guess, yeah, I wanted to just bring that up, that I think getting to more site-specific levels in some cases is going to be important here in the future. So yeah, it looks like 4 minutes left or so I'd be happy to take any feedback, comments, or thoughts.
Questions, comments? Brian?
How do you identify your reference sites? And is there a pre-development inventory done on any of the sites in your development?
In most cases, I don't think there's a pre-disturbance inventory. I'm just going to go back to this slide with all the ways that the sites were monitored. But one of the big problems is this is all representative sampling, which is I'll write that in a second. But yeah, 2011, 100-meter transects or 250-meter transects were placed on the well pad and on an adjacent, it just says adjacent undisturbed. What's problematic with the idea of representative sampling is that if I went to a pad independently and picked what 100 meters I thought best representative and everyone else independently, we'd have as many different transects as there are people in this room. If I put the same transect down and we all monitored that, we're probably going to get 100, or I don't know how many people are in here, but everyone's going to have a different interpretation of that transect. And that's, yeah, the monitor, it's often the divide and conquer method with some of this data. So there might be 6 field technicians and they each go out to a certain number of pads and do their monitoring. They pick the 100 meters on the well pad that they think is representative of it. And then they pick 100 meters of the adjacent land that's representative of that. So,
Brian,
Go ahead.
we were conducting pre-development inventories of all of our locations.
That's what I thought, and that's why I was asking the question, Paul. I know you had this discussion on it, and I know if we have that, then we have a way to select reference sites, and we have a restoration capacity that we can aspire to, because then, you have your base information. Because you remember when we had the discussions about, if somebody wants sagebrush here, there was never sagebrush here. So I just wondered if that was working its way into the research.
I think it should, and I don't, most of this stuff that I have, what they're comparing to is an off-site reference, but
That's what I was thinking.
what the power of this balanced acceptance thing is it's a spatially balanced design, so they generate a random start point, and then you can buffer into that. What we're trying to do there is exclude near neighbors, so it's somewhat random. The start point's random, and then the next point, we have to figure this out on this scale. If we need 40, that image that I was taking is essentially like a digital Dotmire. If we need 40 of them to accurately give us the population of that well pad, how spaced out do they need to be? So this start point gets randomly selected, but then you can say no other point can be within 15 meters of that. So on a well pad like that, it just means that you're probably going to capture some of this veg, and you're probably going to capture some of this bare ground. Same thing if you did reference sites like that. Rather than having all 40 points right here, you're going to have it spatially spread out, so you're getting a better sense of what the population is as a whole.
Okay.
Just one consideration rather than looking at reference sites, because maybe that's not harder than you want to get to specifically to safe routes, but if you guys look at ESDs for those particular soil types.
Yeah, that's something that,
Because what I'm afraid is if you just do a reference reach or a reference site, that may not be what we want, but that's what you set the bar.
well,
And particularly for safe.
that's,
If you use ESDs,
yeah, that's why I put that NRCS soil map up there, is that when we look at ESDs, there's a huge range of variability in the reference transects that are being run within them.
You got where I was going there. If you have the pre-inventory on the site, you have your aspiration.
One of
no,
the,
what I'm saying that is maybe not, that isn't the aspiration you want. We have a rangeland heavily utilized for livestock, and there's no forms out there. Is that really what you want that reclamation standard to be? That's where I say that's the real danger of doing this.
the problem with ESDs in Wyoming is they're not quite as well developed as, like, New Mexico, I think, is the only state that has very, very solid ESD development. If we did use ESDs, what I like about that is that we can say this group of pads is in this ESD, they should all have this range of a target for what they're reaching at. But if we could do that, we could essentially double the time that we're monitoring our pads, because we don't have to do our monitoring in our offsite near as intense. So yeah, I do like sort of that idea. It's just they're not developed to a fine enough scale at this point in time.
Okay, you had a follow-up you wanted to do after this conversation we talked about before lunch. You want to do that right now?
Very quickly, and I was,
That is just,
Thank you.
well, I'm in the data call letter from Fish and Wildlife. And most importantly, attachment, I believe it's number 2. Attachment 2, list of population status and threat data requests. One of the issues we identified earlier is proposed energy developments within occupied sagebrush habitats, and how the agencies are responding to the data requests regarding those proposals. And Mary, you may be the resident expert on this, and how the state of Wyoming is dealing with any proposed developments. And the data call question. The question is, how are they being treated?
But I can tell you what we've done is that if there's a DDCT, it's considered, they're in. If there's no DDCT, it's not. Because it's not past the planning processes.
And that's pursuant to the meeting we held in Lander and had a fairly lengthy conversation about how to handle them. Counting anything that might be imagined is impossible, and it's erroneous. So we said our line is when you come to a project stage and you actually are submitting those.
Submitting DDCTs. Is that how Fish and Wildlife? My question, I guess, is from a BLM standpoint, any and every proposal you have on the table of any kind that has not been approved, is that being submitted for the data call? And if so, how is that being reconciled when you don't have approval for it?
Jimmy,
No, it's a fruit product.
it's essentially what Mary's asking.
Everybody's doing it the same.
Just wanted to follow up, because the request is proposed, but it's not approved. I don't know how you could reconcile it in the data call.
Well, I think the reconciliation comes from proposed and what did proposed mean. Proposed meant pending, not long-term proposed.
Approved projects. That's my key. Are these approved projects?
That would be the definition for the state of Wyoming, but realize with the other states, they all have different wording.
Okay, so for anything that's projected for Wyoming, it would have to be approved. You'd have to have a record of decision on file for that to be counted against us, correct?
And DDCT.
And the deeds.
Okay. All right. You gonna do this one?
No, Nicholas.
Oh, you thought. Oh, he moved. While he's coming up here, if you haven't signed in on the sign sheets, please do that. It's how we're able to keep track of your address and get information to you. So make sure you signed in somewhere. If they're out,
it's a effort that I think is potentially very, very helpful for us in this stage jobs. And this is, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with the NAME program, National Agricultural Energy Program, set up by the USDA through NRCS and all that. That stuff is contracted crops and that sort of stuff. So it's growing every year. Every year, 3 years, we get 1 imagery. Typically, it's a 1 year round resolution pixel. It's a public domain imagery source. You know, you hear us talk a lot about, digitizing these sort of things off imagery and this sort of almost all of that imagery that you're going to see is named imagery. From on, it's publicly available. I might just be email it from us. Yes. Now, one thing that we can do as a state is we can actually pay the difference between getting 1 meter and half meter. So, half meter imagery, you get, so 1 meter is, 1 meter on each side. If you do half meter imagery, it's actually 4 pixels for every one of our pixels. It costs around $500,000 for us to buy it up. That's actually pretty good considering the imagery itself is around, let's say, anywhere from 1.2 to 12 million. So the actual basic cost is being covered. All we're asking is to cover the difference. So here's some examples just showing, some visual examples showing the difference. So you can see on the left there is the 1 meter, and on the right is the half meter. And you just look at the difference in what you can pick out. Who would have guessed throw a trampoline? There's you can't see it if you're so I actually didn't put this together, but I know enough that I'm pretty sure I know exactly what's going on here. So Wyoming got flown in 2012 and it's 1 meter. Idaho is right next door, got flown in 2013 and it's half meter. And so there's a portion where you can look at the same spot and they are different seasons. So to answer your question, it's 2013 versus 2012. Are different years, same season, just different year. But so it's slightly different, but there's a start where the funds overlap. You can do this sort of stuff. We can look at the same spot from the same product. It's just around the Idaho Wyoming border. So here's another example. Again, it's slightly different seasons, but the idea is the same. See. I think it's when these get dropped off, but you can see the road going down into the water. If we were to look at it on the left there, we might think that that's a disturbance because we can kind of see that it's there and we don't know if there's vegetation there, so we'd be very suspicious. But if you even have if you're getting to know that there's a road there. So it is a different year, but distinguishing whether it's 10-foot road or 2-track road and all that stuff becomes a lot easier when we've got 4 times as many vehicles. Here's some trees. You can actually pick out some of the beetle fiddle, all that stuff. more houses. So, I mean, it makes a huge difference. So things that we already set up and install executive orders that we need to make the trade whatever the most recent years in the DDCT. So if we get that to happen here, we're going to have a higher percent. Again, this is a lot of counties, this is property tax, urban planning, that sort of stuff. This is statewide public imagery, kind of the standards imagery that we disseminate statewide differences. You know, we want to find out the difference so that we can get that half meter difference. So here's some of the funding partners. So currently we're still looking for $211,000, which sounds pretty high. But when you look at design contributing PMS, throwing in a huge chunk, Forest Service is throwing in a huge chunk. And then a bunch of different counties and Fish and Wildlife Service put in some on state engineering. But you know, we have in total, basically federal agencies, we have pretty much till the end of the year, I think another month after that, to get across the amount. For the private, I think they have a little bit longer. We both have to be by April, I know by March. So there's not much time to round up this last $211,000, but hopefully all of you guys see the potential and the benefit of buying up this half meter versus one of the standards 1 meter. So what I'm asking is if we can maybe take this back, you know, we can talk back here with some people, hopefully, you know, we can round up some of that money, or if there's some people that can see that this is definitely a good thing, maybe take it back and see. Try to fill in that last bit of the circle. So, any questions?
Any questions of the data there from like just a matter of processing? Get so much we haven't been used data from the last year's flight. Is that true?
Well, they're going to fly again in 2015. It's just a matter of, you know, what sensor do they use and that sort of stuff. You know what? It'll still be 4-band systems. So it'll still be, you'll still be able to do the color from red. It's just a matter of the 2015 flight can we upgrade to that. Yeah, I think at least one member of there, I can see one question I was thinking was really big point. What's there? How does this compare to the one that stuff you're doing? Well, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's never CS. I think it's the same. Almost is better in the motion of function. And so you've got a little more definition. And so instead of just saying blobs, you're starting to see if we can save question. So to us, and all the reasons that you can understand in camel planning or not, they're already developing their own photography for that same purpose because we just need that higher resolution. Half meter, more half meter better than you. It's just in what you learn, not really much more. Okay, I guess this question is, you foresee all of these problems, and if not, is it worth? One of the questions is for more as well. Yeah, you know, I mentioned that we're going to be talking about before, and that's going to be similar. We have about 10% of the area in the Open Farm 500 area. We have got 280 acres of our information. There's some additional resolution work that's done on those four. But the total there, you know, we're looking at about 10 million acres total for the 5 counties, and we got something like And then this would, I mean, we would have budget for 2013 or something. By early 2014, this would be. Is that the next house? So we do. It's entirely possible. Typically, what I would do in that situation is, depending on how close, but actual fact. So, yeah, it's usually, let's get it. See, so, one map, obviously, so what I do is I just use make this a fact. And then what I have, I have illusion that put it on top. I mean, you can sort of tell the difference. You can use that illusion that, and it makes the line there. Just using the resolution, you know, the same problem. But it's not something that you just do it in this area, maybe more, and over here, it's where. And it just, you know, it's not a problem. The only problem is I'm doing some modern blocks to that area. You probably have to split it and model different. So much different than you see. So let's get back to the question. Yeah, it's not what we what it's what we have. And that's what's involved. And you know, speaking of modeling, you know, there was some discussion about creating 1 meter safe across or safe drug habitat models. And arguing what's driving that 1 meter, maybe it's 1 meter. So if we start getting clear, now we got 4 places contributing to that 1 meter model. It's going to be more accurate. So, and this would be at least as far as piloting with the state life system. So there is some potential for that as well. That's not to say there aren't better local. Okay. What is going to be is on that same in well, I'm not sure I can help you with that. But obviously, the Northeast is the first one that is one. My only question is how likely is it that's going to become better? Not likely that I don't think that you're right. You're make everything like that. I have resolution if you want something like that. And that's why I brought back the reality here of what the cost for the state law. But where you get basically a quadrupling of your intensity for a fairly reasonable amount of money, I think that's where we're at. We go through the whole lot, but absolutely, yeah. We're still a little bit short, which is why I thought this would be a great to be aware of. It's money. And I know that you're looking at it. All right, you passed your income around us today. Everyone's and beats you. Yes, I do. Comparisons to how does this change scale? It's a conclusion. Well, 100% sure on all of it. And I'll answer what I think in my mom. Steer me in the right direction. But elements there, moving from is the 4 pixels to the other, but I did a nice thing. Very minimum. we go back and forth. But if we go a half year, now it's covering, most of the years. So if you think about it, then, 26 pixels or so that's flattened by something. It makes the minimal size distinguish basically nothing. So I'm pretty sure but with all this, and actually, it's interesting because you would think you can see more experiments, but and maybe Brian is still here, right? But so they have ridiculously high resolution, and so they were able to go in and actually map part of the and those circles went down because they had a very more precise. So it's not, they can cut both ways. You're not necessarily going to pick up more service than those big service pick up with and most of the stuff that's small, it's maybe that distinction between is this and this is this not. And then also being able to better visualize what it is that you're doing. Or get a much better. And it gives you the ability to differentiate between consumability and disturbance, which at 1 meter is weird. And I just second that the self-reducing action item service probably also simply because you're able to see more than what you're looking at. So the example of the road that you use, which is software where you kind of look like in all the stuff, then you get that kind of resolution, you find that safe percent. And so then you can say, well, what I don't really have to store there, maybe it's just those 2 tracks and not the whole width that is a problem. And you've got other fragmentation issues that actually for, the same brush cover, feedback. And so we actually see in ours in some of the stuff that we've looked at, where we can actually look at, we can actually get better edges, and some of the stuff that you thought was the surface, when you actually look at it, that obviously, you can find some of those areas that you weren't thinking of now are, but that's not the thought I thought when I found the broadcast. But that changes probably get people to some of those real precise, but it's not going to add. It's more 100%. Sure.
Not to delay that point, another project component, we certainly like to do this. If you get the imagery and then you have to go out and ground truth it, because something shows disturbed areas, but in reality it's not. So it actually increases everybody's efficiency. There's a lot of times when local near half and part of that on the ground, and so you have better data, whether it's to analyze disturbance or they actually get a snapshot of their habitat and know what you have to look at on the ground.
Thank you. Let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back.
and it's supposed to be available starting tomorrow. That may be optimistic, I'm not sure, but we'll see. Those three speakers, if you got an hour to watch, Brittany Noreen Walsh, who's the regional director of Fish and Wildlife Service. She's a good speaker, and she addressed head-on the listing of venison and how it does not relate to the greater sage grouse. Different species, different scale, different population base. And the rest of her talk was equally informative and engaging. So she's the one that I suggest watching her presentation. Then the chief of the NRCS, Jason Lowen, again, a very positive and engaging speaker who will keep your attention and also provide good information. And then third, a Northeast Montana rancher, his name is Lee Cornwell, Cornwell, excuse me. He's another plenary session speaker who was just sat there with a smile on her face listening to him with his presentation. And again, informative, a great speech. And then all the technical stuff, again, is on during that session. So watch as much of that stuff as you want. I know Julie, where'd she go? She's like, okay, she knows. And is there anybody else that went to that conference that would like to, and if you're able to do it right now? I've kind of had out, but all the speakers were fantastic. Very enjoyable. What everything.
Yeah, I definitely think that this analysis of these students and the rest of the population members different kinds
That's all I have. Thank you. I think Nancy must have left EQ. Okay.
Yeah, just one thing, if everyone remembers that the last safe grouse meeting, Bob so graciously explained the project lead on a driveway issue that involves staking a federal surface, private services was in the checkerboard. I'm happy to report that that issue has been resolved. So when we
Big thanks to Susan because it wasn't going to get resolved if she didn't do it. So we appointed the right person. Would you like to give a legislative update, Mr. Speaker?
No. I have a legislative update. We're in the process of changing leadership at both the Senate and the House. I will be the new Speaker of the House, and Senator Nicholas will be the new President of the Senate. And we have Senator Nicholas and I have made our committee appointments. They've done most of the newspapers, I think, and they're available. I think as of today, they're available online at the legislative website. We have made some significant changes in the makeup of some of our committees, which I think will manifest itself in some different results for some of our state agencies. And we move forward. General session, 40-day session begins January 13th. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, some pertinent to this group and some not, but we will have lots of bills, I'm sure, some of them ordered by 450 bills, that's the road works out, we're going to have to work our way through it in 40 days. So you do the math, some of them make it, some of them won't. And I think that's probably not. And we voted in the Senate. You got anything left? Okay. Next story.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Speaker elect has already heard this one. Once he became Speaker elect, he says, "Greg, now that I'm going to be in this lofty position, I expect that you will kiss my ring." He took it off his hand and put it in his back pocket.
If for those who would like to contribute, I'm trying to get a purple robe and a tiara on the stage for House of Vendors for the speakers. We've got a couple of months to get that done. Hey, congratulations, Ed. And for those who haven't seen the job that Kermit in particular did in the House, one of the most thoughtful jobs of committee appointments, chairman and chairwomen in many, many years. And I called it the other day and applauded that because it's a very balanced, very, very reasonable way to conduct government, and much of that credit was to Kermit. So hats off to you for that. Buddy, you know,
Yeah, just 5 or 6 items here I wanted to go through quickly. Probably one of the biggest items to share with you today is effective January the 3rd, our state directors have gone same-sex requirements. His last workday will be January the 2nd, effective January 3rd. So, no discussions or appointments yet in terms of acting. So stay tuned on that. And I guess I think that Bob can affirm that clearly Don has just done a tremendous amount as it relates to this species for a long, long time. Created a pretty heavy bucket of water as it relates to the land in this effort. And so kudos to him for tremendous leadership on this item. And he's going to have some pretty good shoes to fill. So anyway, again, active nothing for the reasons.
yeah, before you go on, I think most of the people in the room realize this, but Wyoming goes back to the partnership that we have with the other. All you have to do is go work in another state for a little while to realize how truly fortunate we are. And that starts with Don, that permeates, that attitude permeates through the organization to people like Buddy and Pam, Jenny, that are with us day in and day out. People like Larry Franklin, Mineral Side, Chris, I think was here a little while ago. It just made everything possible. And so we knew this was going to happen. I can't but applaud Don for the chance to finally do it, but boy, did I ticked off that he did it. But pass that along. It's really if you're looking for like a state or something, I know it's a real deal because he told me he already had the job on the Revelation Chicken Brand. That's what they closed his house.
Likewise, on the theme of personnel, we also have the Munson, our project manager, who's going to state that right on, who's going to be taking the detail in the Idaho State Office. So she's going to be gone for 90 days, beginning December 1. So she'll be gone December, January, February.